You'd think that something like how to live a meaningful life is something that we talk about all the time, given how obviously important it is to us. But actually, who are we supposed to talk about it with? Our friends? I mean, they're probably just as confused as we are. Schools? Universities? Too busy teaching us more important things. And our parents? Oh, no. We don't talk to our parents about that kind of stuff. And so, in my experience, we just never talk about it and go through life on this sort of weird autopilot thing until one day you wake up and you realize that life is really, really flat. And as you lie there awake in the middle of the night, you can't help but wonder, why did no one talk to me about this stuff before? And so this is my attempt to do that today. Now let's start with the advice that we do get. And we'll call this advice Plan A. And Plan A sounds a bit like this. You have to do really well at school. You have to get into a great university like Oxford or Cambridge. You don't just do a bachelor's, you do a master's, a PhD, maybe an MBA. While at university, you're supposed to meet the perfect partner. Smart, funny, hardworking, and caring. You leave university, get a great job with a huge salary. You use that salary to buy a house, 4 bedrooms minimum. You guys move in together, buy some cars, get married, have some kids, get some pets to keep things interesting. A dog, a big one, because they're quite fun, and maybe some fish, because they're great feng shui. And then, once you've done all of that, Plan A, tick. But Plan A didn't really cut it for me. I did all right at school. I went to the good universities, got the PhD, got the MBA, had some exciting jobs, long-term relationships. I bought the house. I have a fancy-ish car. Never had the dog, but had the fish. And life was still just a bit gray. I mean, don't get me wrong. This is a great recipe if you want a safe life, a comfortable life. But if you want a meaningful life, I'm not so sure. And it's not just me experiencing this. Our planet has never been richer or more educated. And yet, even before the pandemic, things were going very wrong. Obesity rates through the roof, mental health issues everywhere, more and more people disengaged at work, and fewer loving relationships. It's like the core of how we derive meaning from our lives was being eroded away. And so, maybe Plan A is done. We need a new plan. And we're going to call this plan, Plan B. Now, at the heart of Plan B is an idea that hit me a few years ago, and I'm going to try and recreate that revelation here today. I need you guys to think of the answer to a simple question. What do you want to be when you grow up? Or, if you think you are grown up, what did you want to be before you grew up? So let's see. How many of you, the first thought that came to mind was something career-related? I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be an architect. Show of hands. Okay, so quite a few of you. And how about those who instead, that first thought, was something achievement-related? I want to be successful. I want to be rich. I want to be famous. Okay, a few more of you. And thirdly, and be honest with this one, how many of you, that first thought was about a state of emotional well-being? I want to be happy. I want to be fulfilled. I can see 3 hands. So that's interesting, right? The question was about being, and yet our minds automatically go to doing and achieving. In fact, we're obsessed with that. But maybe, if we want meaning in our lives, we just need to be more. I mean, think about it. You are happy. It's a state of being. You don't do happy. That doesn't make sense. It's about being. And I heard this from the Dalai Lama. I read about it in the Science of Psychology. And everyone I know who's loving life, that's pretty much how they think about it. So I'm convinced we just need to be more. And so, how do we do that? Well, I've got 3 tips for you. Tip number 1, we need to appreciate the moment. We all walked from those entrance doors to our seats. But if I was to ask you how many steps it took you to do that, you'd probably have no idea. And that's the point. Every moment, there's all this information from the world around us, our minds, our bodies, and unless we pay attention to it, it's just gone. It's like it never happened. And you might say, well, Nick, who cares how many steps it takes to get from A to B? Fair enough. But what if we are missing information that is extremely valuable to us? This is me at the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, the world's highest freestanding mountain at just under 6,000 meters above sea level. It takes 6 days, 12 plus hours of hiking each to get there. On day 3, I developed altitude sickness. On day 4, insomnia. And so a few hours before that summit, there I was, physically exhausted, mentally barely able to keep it together, but focused on that next step. And here's the thing, the ground up there is basically sand from the harsh winds constantly eroding it. So when you step on it, your foot slips. And so you muster all of your strength for that next step, given how tired you are. It's a tiny step. And then it slips back. But you keep going. Step and slip and step and slip. It is painful, agonizingly slow. But you are resolute because you've seen 1,000 versions of that photo and you are determined to add yours to the collection. And so you keep going. And a few hours later, you come round this hill and there you see it in the distance. That sign. Congratulations. You've made it. And that moment, I do not remember. I remember some things about the moment. I remember taking out my camera, checking the battery, giving it to Lucy, taking my pose and saying, "Have you got it?" But I don't remember the view, that once in a lifetime view. I don't remember what my body felt like. I don't remember what my soul was saying to me, having achieved this monumentous thing. But at least I had the photo. Now for me, it's the photo. For you, it might be the car, the house, the job title. The point is, we get so caught up in doing and achieving, we forget about this very moment. And so tip number 1, if we want to be more, we need to appreciate the moment. Tip number 2, we need to feel our way to the right decisions. Now, decisions are interesting because we make them in a relatively short period of time, but they play out over the rest of our lives. Where we choose to live, who we choose to marry, what career we choose to go on. And so obviously, if we can make better decisions, we stand a better chance of living a meaningful life. If you read a book on how to make good decisions, it will tell you to do something like this. First, put all the criteria down, and then weight the criteria because some are more important than others. Put all the options along the top and fill in the blanks. The option with the highest score is the option that you should choose. And I do this a lot. This is my spreadsheet where I'm trying to figure out what country to live in. But despite using this process, I kept feeling like I was getting my decisions wrong until it hit me. This is a process which uses a very logical, rational, problem-solving part of the brain. What about emotions? What about feelings? We need to bring that into the mix somehow. And it's actually remarkably simple. Let's say you're studying history and economics at school, and you need to choose what career to go on. Now, your career coach might say, well, economics, you learn a lot of good skills studying that. Those skills are in high demand, so you're likely to get a job. And actually, those jobs are pretty well paid. And so, on balance, that looks like a pretty great choice. Now, here's the challenge. When you leave an economics lesson, you feel a bit down. You're kind of not that bothered about what your friends are doing or what's going on in the world. You're just disengaged. But when you leave a history lesson, it's different. You're smiling. You do want to know what your friends are up to. You are curious about ideas in the world. There's energy there. You're engaged. And so, yeah, that economics choice is probably going to be a stable career choice. But is it going to be the thing that gets you up in the morning and has you excited about each day? Maybe not. And look, I'm not saying that we make the decision solely on how we feel. But what I am saying is that that spreadsheet needs another row that says, how do I feel about these options? And it should probably be weighted pretty high. You might be thinking, feelings to make life decisions. What is this guy on? But here's how I know I'm right. At some point in your late 20s, early 30s, everybody you know is going to get married. And if you spend your time thinking about this stuff, that's a bit depressing. But it does give you an opportunity to figure out how people make really hard decisions. And so I asked them. And what I was expecting to hear was something like, well, this person makes me laugh, they're really smart, they love me a lot, and that's obviously really important to me. So clearly, I should go with them. In other words, here are my criteria, here's how I value them, and this is the option which is the best. But no one said that to me. Literally, no one said that. Instead, they said, well, you kind of just get a feeling. You know they're the one. One of the hardest decisions we have to make, made on the basis of feeling. And so if we can do it there, why not elsewhere? And so, tip number 2, if we want to be more, we need to feel our way to the right decision. Tip number 3, follow our values. Now again, this sounds simple. Step 1, figure out your values. Step 2, make decisions based on those values. Step 3, have a great life. But now the hard part. We often don't know what our values are, and we find it really hard to make decisions based on those. So let's start here. The clue is in the name. It's your values, what you find important, not to be confused with what your parents, partner, or school thinks is important. Now, I really struggled with this one until it occurred to me. If you want to know what someone's values are, think about what they do when they're really tired. Because when you're really tired, you don't care what anyone else thinks. You just want to do stuff that you want to do. And so, one person, if they're tired, they might want to hang out with friends. Another might want to read a book or watch a documentary. And a third might want to go for a hike in the mountains. That first person probably values human connection, relationships. The second, intellectual stimulation. And the third, adventure. And all 3 of those are my values, by the way. And so there we go, some clarity on what our values are. Now, the really hard part, decisions. That's me again. And behind me is Gershon. And behind us is the high street of a village in Narok County, Kenya. Now, Gershon grew up in rural Kenya, and like many in that situation, he was dealt quite a tough hand in life. His father passed away when he was very young, and as the main breadwinner of the family, that left them in quite a difficult position. Gershon dropped out of school and even spent some time living on the streets. But he's a remarkable character, And to cut a very long story short, I met him when I was building a project team in Kenya. And a few years later, he said to me, Nick, we need to start a business together. And so here we are looking for opportunities in the food systems of Kenya. And we eventually landed on peanut butter manufacturing. Now, obviously, that needs some machines, which requires investment. And so, decision-making time. Everyone was very clear in their advice to me. Nick, how are you going to give money to someone you barely know in a country halfway around the world, which is quite risky, and in a sector which, let's be honest, apart from you like peanut butter, you know absolutely nothing about? All excellent, excellent questions. But they were tapping into this logical decision-making process. I'm interested here in my values. And from that perspective, I mean, what an amazing adventure to go on. And what an intellectually demanding challenge to figure out how to make that work. And most importantly, this guy's story is phenomenal. He deserves every chance he can get, and I want to be a part of that journey. And so, from a values perspective, it's a no-brainer. And I did it. And I'd love to be able to stand here and tell you that we've nailed it, but we clearly have a lot of hard work to do. But actually, that's totally irrelevant. This story makes me smile. It makes me excited about the world. And at the end of the day, isn't that kind of the only thing that matters? So, tip number 3. If we want to be more, we need to follow our values. And ultimately, living a more meaningful life comes down to doing those 3 things. Appreciate the moment. Feel your way to the right decision and follow your values. Enough of Plan A. It's done. Now, it's time for a new plan. Now, it's time for Plan B. Thank you.